So today's video is to show you guys the process of a transmission MEGAFLUSH on my 4.4 TDV8 Range Rover, carried out by Ian Bodsworth of Updates by Bodsy. As I'm not too experienced in filming other people working, I totally forgot to film an intro with Ian. So let's just jump in. The first step was to get the Range Rover levelled out using Ian's famous plastic ramps. Ian made a couple of fine adjustments to the ramps and somehow managed to get the Range Rover level on his very first attempt. Amazing.
That seems pretty good.
It's not far. You do it so many times, you kind of you almost do it by eye.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
Half a degree.
Once the truck was levelled and chopped safely on the ramps, the next job was to drop off the underbody plastics to allow access to the transmission heat exchanger at the front and the transmission itself in the middle. Meanwhile, Ian's extremely knowledgeable son Max showed me how the £4,500 flushing machine operates.
The maximum amount, so it's 20 litres maximum just because, and then it's 10 litres in the gearbox? Or
11 through. Is it? 11.
Okay, on this one. So then you just set for 11 and then once you've connected all the pipes and everything, these you make sure it's flowing the right way with this, and that's spinning.
Cool.
And so for these you have to wait for that to get up to temperature, which about 100 degrees when that is reading. And then just start it and it'll run through all the oil.
Cool. That's very interesting.
Yeah, you see the old and the new. And
so you can see the old and the oil on those dials.
So you can see how dark it is when it's coming through there.
Okay.
Then obviously the new oil's clean. And
that is going to be interesting on this to see how dark that oil is.
Yeah.
Particularly if it's not been changed before.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I mean, chances are it's been changed at some point in its life. You would hope.
Yeah.
But
you know,
it's just going to go.
It's got full Land Rover service history. It doesn't necessarily mean they would have done more.
No, not at all. So if it's got Land Rover service history, Land Rover will say it's sealed for life.
Right.
If you read through the detail, they actually do specify a mileage. I think it's 150,000 miles or 10 years.
Okay.
But of course, by the time the car's got to that age, it's run out of warranty. It doesn't necessarily go back to a dealer, so therefore, sealed for life fable kind of just continues really.
Yeah.
But anything that has oil in needs to be changed.
Yeah.
So before we'll do the flush, we always make sure that we check the oil level first, or at least that make sure that the oil filler can come undone, because if that can't come undone, you can't top it up properly. There's no leaks from the gearbox, which is good.
Yeah, that's good.
There's a tiny bit of wetness around the drain plug, so I don't know whether somebody has drained it before.
Right, I've not touched it, but could have been.
But it's not dripping or anything. It is just literally a tiny bit of wetness.
Right, okay.
So here we check the oil just by draining some out.
Okay. Plug's fairly easy to get to on this.
It's a little bit awkward. You just got to make sure you don't burn your hand on the exhaust.
Yeah.
But it's not too bad. Land Rover will sell you a special tool for about £100, or you could just use an 8mm hex.
I remember doing the 8HP on my 5 Series.
Yeah.
It was the faff of getting up and down from the lift to check the oil, get it to the right temperature, move it, put it into drive, back down again, all that kind of stuff. So there's some coming out of there.
Yeah, which you'd expect. So when the engine's not running, if I take this out all the way, it will pour out.
Right, okay.
If the engine's running, you wouldn't expect much. You'd get a dribble, but you wouldn't expect much to come out.
Yeah.
And quite a few people will check the oil level, but they'll check the oil level without the engine running.
Right.
And that means that the oil level will be wrong. So we've only just taken out enough just to make sure that the filler works and isn't stuck.
Yep.
And just to get an idea as to the colour of the oil.
Didn't look too horrendous to me, to my untrained eye. But
well, no, I mean it's dark. It's definitely well used.
good. Yeah, that's kind of what we want to see in a way.
Yeah.
I guess at that point, if you saw that the oil was really dark or really black, it would kind of indicate issues with the gearbox as well.
Yeah, and if it's got metal in, then you would probably notice
Oh, it's quite dark.
more issues. So yeah, it's when you compare the colour. So this is the greeny type colour for the 8-speed oil, and that's the state of the oil that's in there. So
it's pretty bad, isn't it?
It's not the worst, but it's not bad in terms of metallic content. Looks pretty good.
Okay.
Whether it's been changed before, it's difficult to say. So this is where the oil cooler is for the transmission.
Yep.
It's a water cooler. The pipes are usually fairly straightforward to get off.
Yep. It's like a heat exchanger with coolant going
It's
to
exactly
as well.
that. Yeah.
So is there a certain way around that it's got to be flushed? As in, it'll only go one way around the system, or is it a...
Yeah, well the engine pumps the oil through, so the machine will pump it in, and the machine, you can tell it to switch the flow direction.
Oh, okay.
So depending on which car it is will depend upon what the flow direction is. But either way, as long as you're going through the cooler, which it also is then coming from the gearbox and through the torque converter and all the oil galleries, then that's really why a proper flush, as opposed to just draining the oil, makes the difference.
Yeah, and it's the thermostat on the 8 HP that makes it more...
Yeah, thermostat on the 8 HP opens at 69 degrees, but it's fully open at 79 degrees, so you've got to get the oil temperature higher than that. Which is why a lot of people some people do the 6-speed flush, but some people don't do the 8-speed flush because they're not confident with the 8-speed process. But it's quite straightforward for all of them, really.
Yeah.
But to be honest, whilst yes, I do lots and lots of flushes, anybody who's got one of these, as long as you change some of the oil, is better than just ignoring it and not changing any of the oil. But of course, the only way to change all of the oil is to do a flush.
Yeah.
But some is better than absolutely nothing at all.
Yeah.
So
you could do multiple drops, can't you? But then you still end up diluting the old oil.
yeah,
more
you
each
do.
time.
You do.
Yeah.
I mean, this doesn't get out 100% of the oil because there's still a little bit in some of the oil galleries in the gearbox, but it certainly gets rid of at least 95% of the oil that's in there.
So, transmission temperatures that you're watching there. Okay.
Yeah, so there's a transmission oil temperature and the engine oil temperature, just as a comparison to make sure that it's the right value.
This is engine oil on the right.
That's engine oil. Yeah.
Okay.
And we want this ultimately to get up to about 100 degrees.
Okay.
So that the
Words.
so that the thermostat.
There we go. That's the word.
So the thermostat stays open.
Yeah.
When we're doing the flush.
I didn't realise the transmission oil would warm up just from sort of idling or running.
Yeah, well, because it's running through the torque converter, there is pressure on the torque converter plates.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're not about 1,000 RPM, so it's not putting it under a huge amount of force.
Yeah. So this is the fact it's moving is showing that it's flowing, right?
Yeah, so that's flowing that direction.
And you can see in there how dark that oil is compared to the new. Is that actually full of new oil?
Yeah, that's new oil.
Yeah,
so that'll
yeah.
spin around as well and start flushing.
Yeah. So you can really see just how black and dark that oil is. So a lot of people, when you're on the internet, will say you've only got to use ZF oil, like proper stuff that comes in the ZF bottles.
Yeah, one of my favourite questions.
Yeah. Is that true? And what oil are we using here?
Well, ZF make gearboxes.
Yeah.
Shell and Castrol make oil. ZF remarket Shell and Castrol oil, depending on their needs. ZF don't make any oil. So yes, you can buy ZF oil, and it's absolutely, you know it's the right spec to have.
Yeah.
You can buy the Land Rover oil, which is again rebranded, the same stuff.
I know they do it in their own bottles as well.
Yeah, and there's a multitude of other oils that are on the market. We tend to use Febby Bilstein's oils. They've been proven over years to be, reliable and consistent. The key thing is, and the biggest thing is that the red oils, the old style ATF, Dextron 3, etc. It's just the wrong oil, and never put it into the
that would cause a mess.
The 6-speed box, the 8-speed box, they're finely tuned machines, and putting the red oil is just not going to do it any good at all. So for the 6-speed, it's like a light oaty colour, and on the 8-speed, it's like a green colour, and so you'll see that as we go through.
So that Febby Bilstein oil is designed to match the spec of the Zero spec?
Absolutely, It's designed to match the shell spec, or the customer spec. Let's finish the process.
Right,
that's the current oil that's going through there. Still circulating, which means the thermostat is still open. It's not fully open, so it is closing down, which is what we want it to do. Now it'll never be as clean as the fresh oil, because there'll always be a little bit of colour contamination.
100 times better than it was.
Oh, massively, yes, massively.
You can see the colour of that tub down there. That's what's come out. Disgusting. So the fan's going underneath because we want to bring the temperature back down again.
So we need to have it hot to open up the thermostat, and then we need to cool it down to check the oil level properly at the end of the process. The temperature needs to be between 30 and 50 degrees, so that the right level of oil comes out of the.
That's right. I remember that from doing the BMW.
Yeah.
Sticking a tiny little, meat thermometer.
Oh really?
Well,
that's one way of doing it. Thankfully, we can use electronic tools to be able to say what the temperature is nowadays.
Probably a bit more sensible. Doesn't look too glittery.
No, it doesn't look too glittery. Pretty dark, definitely well used. So we'll see some oil come out of here, but you can see the difference between the old oil and the fresh oil.
It's actually washing away the sort of
the sediment from the bottom.
Murkiness. That was another question that people ask quite often: is do you use detergents? That's something that some people do, isn't it? To clean the inside of the gearbox.
Some people do use detergents. It's a personal preference, I guess. I prefer not to use detergents because you're never going to get them out of the gearbox completely.
That's my instinct with it as well.
Yeah.
Just put the oil that's meant to be in there.
Yeah. And after all, this is only an oil change, but it's a full oil change. So there should be no other detriment to the gearbox at all.
Yeah.
Now clearly, if there was metal particles within the oil, then there is a significant gearbox issue that an oil change will not fix. It may help and it may prolong the life a little, but an oil change and a transmission flush is not going to fix a broken gearbox.
I think a lot of people tend to leave the change until they've actually got an issue that they can that either it's not going into gear or it's jumping out of gear.
If they're getting a transmission fault coming up or an incorrect gear ratio fault, then occasionally this will extend the life of that, but by the time you've get into fault stages, unless it's just a case that the gearbox oil is low that's causing it, then really you need to be saving up for a new gearbox. The torque converter is the biggest issue when you start getting juddering when you're driving, particularly at 30-40 miles an hour, not too much pressure. If you get a juddering and the rev counter is moving slightly, then that's a clear case of old oil and the beginnings of a torque converter issue. But a transmission flush can quite often help to eradicate the symptoms of that, certainly for a period of time. There are some additives, some anti-shudder additives that can be added.
Seen that stuff, the Lucas oil stabiliser.
And they do work, but it's really a last resort. So I do carry it for those customers that really need it as a last resort. But I wouldn't put it in this, and I wouldn't put it in a car that is normally working and has no issue at all, because there's just no need. Using the proper oil will provide the gearbox the mechanism it needs to be able to work properly.
Exactly,
you can move the fan out of the way. So when I do this, I'm going to do it fairly quickly before it heats back up again.
Okay.
So it's down to 40 before we start. It'll go lower than that once I start it and it's cycled around.
Right.
So because we've let it cool down, there's no oil coming out of it.
Okay.
So it's a little bit low.
Yeah. So you just top up now.
And that's it, you just get a dribble of oil coming out.
That's how you know it's
tighten
right
it back up. Normally, if it was on a low mileage car, reset the gearbox.
Right.
But when it gets to above about 120,000 miles, I tend not to reset the gearbox.
That's what I was going to ask you about the adaptations.
Yeah, because if there's no issue, the car, you already know the car, so it's already adapted to the way you're driving. Yes, it will need to adapt to the fresh oil that's in there because it is consistently different quality. Yeah. But if you reset it completely back to factory, sometimes there can be an issue then with it trying to relearn where it should be.
Makes sense, yeah, because all the clutch packs and everything is warm.
Yeah, so it will readapt over 1,500 miles. It will readapt in a way. So generally, what I say is, if you've had a flush, is take it easy for the first couple of 100 miles. Let the gearbox get used to the fresh oil that's in there. Let it adapt itself. And then away you go, but you'll notice significantly smoother gear changes after the
I don't tend to race around anyway, I just waft around in comfort.
So. Well, that's what a Range Rover's for, isn't it? So the same faults that were here before.
Yep.
A lot of them have cleared and they won't reappear again. But obviously your EGR fault that you're already aware of.
Yep.
Is there a couple of others? As long as the functions are working okay, then generally speaking, it's nothing to be too concerned about.
Yeah. So that's it, guys. All done. We've got fresh oil in the car now. The stuff we drained out looked pretty bad. So
it was pretty grim, but you've done 193,000 miles, so it's not unexpected.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, with these cars, that they've rarely changed. So the fresh oil, you should notice smoother gear changes, maybe a bit of better fuel economy, but I think we drive quite sedately in a way, so. I don't think that'll make that much difference.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see though. That'll be quite a nice little bonus. Yeah. But yeah, definitely glad to have that changed over and fresh oil in it. So hopefully she'll be good for a few more miles yet now. Yeah, so
excellent.
Quite good.
So anybody with a 6-speed gearbox, 8-speed gearbox, do transmission flushes on those for all of the modern Land Rovers, Range Rovers. As well as diffs, transfer box there, you know, if you're into your handyman work, then you'll be able to do that yourself in a way. But the transmission oil, the machine is not cheap, so not many garages have it, and that's the reason why it's a bit more difficult to come across.
Yeah, I was going to do my own oil change on this as I mentioned in a few videos, but it's nice to know it's been done properly and we've changed all the oil as opposed to a small part of the oil, it's when you drop it yourself. So.
When you're just at home and I come to you, so
exactly, yeah.
Makes
I don't have to leave my house.
Nice and simple and straightforward.
Perfect.
Cool.
Yeah, and then other stuff as well you do? You've got
other stuff, things for the Discovery 4, for example, the reversing camera, remote control for the fuel burner heaters that most of the diesels have got in the UK, engine remaps if you want a power upgrade.
Fuel burning heater remote is a fantastic upgrade, by the way. If you guys haven't got it, it's really, really nice to have.
And that can be the Land Rover kit, or I do an aftermarket kit that has a GPS tracker on it as well, so you can track where the car is, find out where it's been.
Cool.
It's not a police tracking system, but it certainly gives you an idea as to where it is, and maybe if you should be unfortunate to get it stolen, you might be able to get it back that way. I do lots of different software updates for Discovery 3, Discovery 4, Range Rover Sports. There's not so many to do on the Range Rovers because they've got quite good spec on them in a way. Yeah. But I guess there's always something to be done.
Say if I added, for example, cooled seats or something spec that it's not got on it now, would you be able to plug in and change the...
Yeah, if it's something that you add that needs to be enabled, then I can enable that.
Cool, good to know.
Yeah.
There we go.
It's been a pleasure. The weather's held out for us. So good to see you.
Yeah, and the assistant as well.
Max.
Not got on the camera right now, but he's done a good job as well, helping out. So that's it, guys. I'm going to get a good run this afternoon. I'm going to go down up to Nick's house to work on the Asarco project, which will get a good run, and it should all be good.
Cool.
Nice. Cheers, guys. See you next time. So, guys, that's it. The transmission flush is done. Ian's packed up and gone now, and I'm itching to give the Range Rover a quick drive just to see if I can feel any difference in the way it drives. So let's give it a go. So guys, as per Ian's advice, I'm taking it nice and easy for the first few hundred miles. I don't really tend to race around anyway, but take it nice and steady. But so far, the difference is night and day between how it used to shift and how it's shifting now and driving.
Although I didn't really have any serious issues with the transmission before the oil change, it did have a tendency to hesitate between gear changes, and the gear changes at low speed sometimes were a bit lumpier than I would have expected or liked. Those problems have immediately been rectified by having this oil change. The hesitancy between gear changes has completely gone. The gear changes are really tight and concise now, and it just generally feels like it knows what gear it wants to be in better now, and it doesn't hunt around as much. So I've just come to a full stop here. We're going to pull onto the main road and accelerate as I normally would. Previously it used to kind of slur the first, second and gear changes into each other, so it kind of felt like there was a bit of a jerking motion as you went through those first three gears. So it'll be interesting to see how it feels now. Let's give it a go. Smooth as butter, guys. Smooth as you like. That's a genuinely really noticeable improvement to the way this car drives. Yeah, beautifully smooth now. To be honest, it's not really surprising that it's improved when you saw the state of the original oil that came out. That oil, I reckon it is probably original. Even if it had been changed, it may have been 100,000 miles ago that it was changed. So it's not really surprising that fresh oil has really helped the way the transmission's working. The best news was yet to come though, guys. On the 90-mile trip home from Nick's farm, this is the fuel economy she achieved. By far the highest I've had yet. So yeah, really pleased. I want to say thank you to Ian again, and to Max, his helper. They did a fantastic job. They didn't leave a drop of oil on my driveway, and I can just tell as an engineer that Ian is a bloke that really knows his stuff. He's not a pretender like a lot of people in the Land Rover servicing game are. I can just tell from speaking with him that he's a guy that really knows his stuff about these cars. So it feels good to put your cars in the hands of somebody that knows what they're doing. So I've left Ian's details in the video description for you guys to go and check him out. So if you've got a gearbox that needs servicing or anything else that needs updating or improving on your Land Rover or Range Rover product, go and speak to Ian, he'll sort you out. So once again guys, thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you again next time.